The G7 is not really has that much weight when it comes to matters of conflict. It has more economic weight. And so what is the forum? It is deal makers and breakers. Now, Mr. Trump thinks he's the best in the world. There's limited evidence for that. So until he comes in and tries to really force a deal, and how much does he really want to? Does America really want a nuclear-armed Iran, which many people in the States believe is the aim of the Islamic Republic? Do most of the European leaders? Do the Arab leaders in the Middle East? No. None of them do.
Israel has struck a military base in western Tehran, according to state media. It comes less than an hour after Israel issued an evacuation warning for parts of the Iranian capital. And world leaders are meeting at a G7 summit in Canada today as global tensions continue to heighten over this conflict in the Middle East. The name of the game for presidents and prime ministers is likely conflict resolution and de-escalation. But just how easy is that with the Donald Trump in the room? Let's talk to Tim Marshall, author and foreign correspondent. It's always such a pleasure to have you on the programme, Tim. Thank you very much indeed. Tell us where you think the G7 is right now. Is it strong enough to really do something about what's happening between Israel and Iran?
No, neither is the UN, neither are the Russians or the Chinese. It's between the two of them. And then, of course, the one person that could really put some heat on Israel, which would be President Trump, and he doesn't look too minded to do so.
What do you imagine will happen?
There will be some ritualistic calls for peace, people saying nonsensical and factually inaccurate things such as, wars are never solved through fighting, but only by negotiations, which is questionable. And then they'll be ignored. So unless Mr. Trump comes out with something pretty surprising, which I would be surprised about. So the next few days, the two sides will continue to fire missiles at each other. And that does bring the question, who might run out first? Will Israel's defensive system, which is wrongly called Iron Dome is for low-level, short-range missiles. Will the missiles they fire to try to protect their cities and facilities run out before Iran runs out of A, cruise missiles, and B, the launchers upon which the cruise missiles are put? I don't know. I suspect that Iran might run out first, though.
Can we, we'll come back to that, and actually we've got some very interesting questions from our listeners about what's happening in the Middle East at the moment. But I'd love some more of your thoughts on the G7. I mean, would it be fair to say that the role that diplomacy can play in world events at the moment is so hugely diminished that actually when you see a meeting like the G7 happening, some of us think, what are you doing bothering with all of that? You're needed back home in your respective territories. What's the point of going to the Canadian Rockies? What will you achieve?
Well, yeah, I'm in some sympathy with your premise. The original idea was going to be they were going to talk about economics and trade and tariffs and all the rest of it and try and iron out a few problems. But of course, this will come to the top of the agenda. I hope they also talk about those other things. But the wider point you're making, I think, is correct. I think international diplomacy and global diplomacy has been diminishing slowly right across the century. We're a quarter of the way into this century. If the UN calls for this or calls for that, it has nowhere near the weight it used to have, even a Security Council resolution. And that's partly because of the politicization and the fact that, within the P5 of the Security Council, one side can veto something. So you don't have that. The G7 is not really has that much weight when it comes to matters of conflict. It has more economic weight. And so what is the forum? It is deal makers and breakers. Now, Mr. Trump thinks he's the best in the world. There's limited evidence for that. So until he comes in and tries to really force a deal, and how much does he really want to? Does America really want a nuclear-armed Iran, which many people in the States believe is the aim of the Islamic Republic? Do most of the European leaders? Do the Arab leaders in the Middle East? No, none of them do.
Incoming question from Ben, who says, in terms of international law, what was the legality, the status of the preemptive attack on Iran?
International law, how many divisions have they got? To misquote Stalin's question about the Pope. You can make a case that of the preemptive strike. You can make the case going all the way back to Thomas Aquinas of the just war theory. So international law, like most law, is what is your interpretation of it. So if you want, I can say, yes, I believe that Iran was making a nuclear missile. Yes, I believe all the blood-curdling and existential threats they have made to Israel down through the years. And yes, there is plausibility they would have fired a nuclear missile at them. Consequently, it's a preemptive war, which has justification. Or I can say there is no justification for this. Iran was not attacking Israel, nor had they since the past last year's. So, you choose. I mean, Iran has actually attacked Israel many times via its proxies over the past 30 years. But, it's down to you to choose your interpretation of law. But that goes back to our previous question and answer, doesn't it? That how much does international law is so much weakened through this century.
Yeah, and we're certainly feeling that, I think, at the moment in terms of our personal anxieties. So heaven knows how people are feeling when they're under direct attack about those anxieties and what it is that holds people to account. Where do you think the UK should stand in all of this? What do you think Sir Keir Starmer is willing to do?
To use the good offices of the United Kingdom to bring the two sides round. We are a bit part player in this. We have very limited influence on either side. It would not matter one jot to the Israelis other than public opinion were we to stop selling the very, very small and relatively insignificant amount of arms that we do sell to Israel. So I think really what Mr. Starmer will be trying to do is make all the right noises when it comes to the press conference today and tomorrow, and try and make sure that Britain keeps out of the way. Because unlike last year, when you could make a stronger argument that it was Iran that fired the first heavy salvos into Israel, and the United Kingdom joined the Saudis, Jordanians, Americans, French and others in helping to shoot the missiles down. The danger this time is that if the United Kingdom joins in trying to bring those missiles down, then British interests will become a target. So I suspect the UK is going to try and stay out of the way. That actually is related to another very big question the Iranians have. Do they attack American targets as they promised they would? Because they say, Israel doesn't do this unless America says it can. Now, the American consulate was damaged yesterday. There were no fatalities in Tel Aviv. I don't think that counts. It wasn't the target, it was just damaged. If the Iranians go after an American target, that's going to change the whole equation of this conflict at the moment.
Do you imagine that if the Iranians were to go after an American target, that would be a target somewhere in the Middle East? Or are you saying that there would be a target in America?
Oh, well, that would be without doubt an act of terrorism, and they would then try to have plausible deniability that it wasn't them, that it was a proxy that they had not ordered to do so. So I doubt that. No, I think if they make what is a massive decision for them, let's say we're going to order one of our militias in Iraq to send missiles into a US base in the region, and let's say there's fatalities amongst American servicemen and women, that would probably bring in the United States. And the point about that is only the United States has something called a MOP, a massive ordnance penetrator bomb. It weighs 30,000 pounds. As far as I know, the biggest bomb the Israelis have is about 2,000 pounds. And it's doing enormous damage, the Israelis, but only that bomb, and only the Americans, A, have it and can deliver it. That's the only thing that would absolutely destroy the Iranian nuclear industry. The Israelis can only damage it. So do the Iranians really want to bring that down upon themselves? hard decisions.
Can I just ask a quick question, Tim, about, Fee was discussing this earlier with Alistair Burt, former Tory
Yes.
Foreign Office Minister, and the notion that regime change in Iran might be the end game for Netanyahu. I mean, even if that does happen, and Alistair Burt didn't seem to think it was very plausible, there's no chance of Iran suddenly being ruled by an Israel-positive Persian equivalent of the Liberal Democrats, is there? I mean, it's just not like that.
No, it doesn't. I mean, Mr. Burt is an astute observer of these things. I agree. It doesn't look in the near term. What is happening at the moment, and especially if you actually see Israeli jets in the skies above Tehran, proving just how dominant they are. I mean, that would be quite a moment. I mean, they fly over Beirut and say you can't do much about this. To fly over Tehran, that would weaken the regime in the eyes of the population, but not in the short term to the effect of it being overthrown. But the bigger point, I think, is this saying that the Iranians have. That during the time of the Shah in the 70s, they had no problem with Israel. They didn't share the Arab view of the state of Israel. But that completely changed after the revolution in 79 when the Ayatollahs came to power. But the saying then was we exchanged the crown, the Shah, for the turban, the Ayatollahs. A lot of people in Iran now say we might exchange the turban for the boots, by which they mean the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. I don't see Jeffersonian democracy replacing what is there at the moment.
Have you ever known such turbulent times, Tim?
Yes, most of the past time of the 8,000 years of recorded history.
Actually, that's an important message because, I mean, in all seriousness, Tim, we have had some messages this afternoon from people who are worried. This is if you have children or grandchildren, and many of our listeners do, they're worried. They're seriously worried.
I understand that. I have sympathy for it. It is a very unsettling time. Two things. I'll try and be brief. One is that I'm confident we're in a new era. It hasn't got a name yet. We knew the Cold War, we knew its name. We knew the post-Cold War era, we knew its name. That was unsettling. But we're now in a new era. I think the post-Cold War era is over. And when eras are over, whether it's the concert of Europe after the Napoleonic wars, when these systems come to an end, things are very much in flux and mixed around, and that makes you feel unsettled. And that's where we are now, but they usually settle down. Second thing is, if you look, was it really so stable in the 1970s? There were proxy wars going on in Angola. The Soviets' tanks were here. There was a war in 73, 67, etc., etc. I'm not sure it's that much more unstable. What I think is that we got used to the past few decades. And lastly, where I do have some sympathy is I do think that the British political and military class is correct in trying to get the psychology right of the population, that these are times where the prospect of war, which was, so far away, remains unlikely for us, remains unlikely. And there's not going to be a third world war anytime soon. People have been going on about that for years now. But they're right to say on the horizon, whether it's Russia, we have to understand in this new time that possibility is bigger than it was, albeit still unlikely.
But Tim, isn't one of the main differences as well that we have a chaos puppet in office in America? So that does change the kind of spectrum of chaos across the world.
Yes, it makes things a lot more uncertain. Although I would say that Trump did not start any wars in his previous administration, and he actually doesn't want to start. He's actually quite risk averse at that level. He's not risk averse in other ways, but he is so unpredictable and volatile that that is a worry. And it comes at the same time as you have a vehement, extreme fascistic-like nationalist in Russia leading it, a leader in China who clearly wants to put his mark on history, possibly via Taiwan, and the rise of strong nationalistic leaders such as Modi in India. And they've all arrived at the same time because they are all symptoms of the same cause. this new time we're in.
It is quite the mandem, isn't it? Tim Marshall, always lovely to talk to you. Thank you very much
Thank you for
indeed.
the invitation to speak with you.